the need for nurture. It sure is hot out there. If we don't get some relief pretty quick, everything's going to start to wither up and die. You know what I'm talking about? This comment's pretty easy to understand when we're referring to weather and the natural environment, trees and lawns and vegetation. It's pretty easy to see the negative effects that prolonged drought has on an environment when it's deprived from water or the nourishment of rain. I drive down the streets and you'll see lawns that are just yellow and dead as hay. I guess that's the appropriate term there, dead as hay. But, maybe then you also see right next to it, same environment, lawns that are totally green. I think they're getting something that the lawn that was dead wasn't getting. That's cool. But what if I were to make that same exact statement and this time refer to the emotional and spiritual environment that you are growing up, you and your families are exposed to? It sure is hot out there. If we don't get some relief, everything will start to wither and die. Do you understand how that could be in the spiritual, the climate that your family is living in? It says the same dryness and drought in the spiritual realm and in the emotional realm of a house also produces stress and dryness and discouragement and actually death in many areas. Well, this confirms that we like to use scripture in this church, so Luke 8, verse 6. It's just a little verse within the larger context of the story, but it says this: a sower went out to sow seed, and going on to the verse 6, other seed fell on rocky soil, and as soon as it grew up, remember this, it did grow up. At some point, there was enough nourishment. There was an environment that growth was allowed, all right? As soon as it grew up, it withered away because it had no moisture. Dare I say, nourishment. And I would say that nourishment is what we are going to refer to as nurture. What water is to the soil and vegetation, so is nurture and nourishment from God to our children and our families and those we live with. If our lawns were brown and the leaves on our plants on the counter started to droop, we would easily conclude that they need some water and probably go and turn the sprinkler on or do some work to get that taken care of, because they understand that is an indicator that things are amiss. Much more so in the spiritual and the emotional realm. We need to be vigilant in paying attention to the crops that we are growing, our little children, our friends, our mates, husbands and wives. Are you aware if there is a drought and that they might be stressed and dry, and they're spiritual or emotional, and therefore their life is threatened? Well, this message is really a continuation of a series on parenting that I've been doing for the last 2 weeks, and this will be the third week. The first day I spoke on a father's love and how that it needs to be, for one thing, willing to look long term and not just simply emotionally respond to every need that a child has. And as you listen to any message, you need to remember that that is just maybe one sentence in a larger paragraph and one paragraph in a larger story. And teaching, I am not going to balance out what I say today with all the other sides. I know there are 2 sides, 3 sides. As in fact, the second message I said, there's more than 2 sides pulling to make sure that your child grows straight. And I alluded to the importance of bracing, like a tree that needs to grow straight. We end up applying braces in its tender young years. And 2 is not enough. You need to have at least 3 different directions pulling to make sure that they grow straight and not have a tendency to be just like you or we aren't trying to recreate ourselves in our children. We know what living in that shell does, We want something better for them, right? So when you hear the message that I bring today, this bit of truth, I want you to look and apply that to your life and your parenting and your nurturing of your friends and your spouse. In light of what has already been communicated, that we need to have boundaries that are very firm to protect a child, to support a child. The second message, I encourage you to get that in order to be able to have the right context for this message. But now today, I want to address this common need inside of every human being, and that is the need for nurture. The definition of the word nurture, the verb says to care for and encourage the growth or development of. All right? The noun is the caring for and encouraging the growth of someone or something. All right? I want to make sure that you understand that the noun or the verb, the action word, all of these things have people who are doing them. And so nurture cannot happen outside of a human touch, a human reaching out and interacting with another person. Nurture it cannot be looked at as something that you examine on a screen and go, oh yeah, that's nurturing. Nurturing has to be seen and experienced and received from a person. Scientifically, according to the National Academy of Sciences in 2012 here, it says that nurturing aids in brain development. A mother's affection during the early stages of a child's life appear to help the development in the area of the brain involved in learning, memory, and stress response. Researchers from the Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis determined that school-aged children whose mothers nurture them early in life have brains with a larger hippocampus. I'm not a medical person, therefore I rely on those people who have done the research. And I rely on them usually to pronounce it, and I do practice quickly, but hippocampus, all right. I passed the test. The hippocampus, I can only do it once. Hippocampus, think of it as a hippocampus, right? Hippocampus. Can we say this together so I don't feel like I'm the only one who stumbles? On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Hippocampus. Again, hippocampus. All right, works. Hippocampus is a key structure important to learning, memory, and response to stress. One of our missionaries we support actually has worked in Romania a lot. And I don't know whether it was Nancy Johnson and Sharon Freiberg, if they're here, who have gone to work with that missionary. And part of what she did was to work with the orphans. And this is a little bit shocking here. The orphans in Romania were deprived from a lot of the physical interaction that nurturing is what they were deprived from. And the lack of that nurturing produced a physical effect that this particular article pointed out, having to do with the makeup of the brain in the early. And so an extreme case of lack of nurturing, there's a reactive attachment disorder, RAD as they call it, is something that happens. In recent studies, brain scans of Romanian orphans have shown an overall reduction in brain volume compared to healthy children. And here we have, on the left here, a 3-year-old child, normal child. And there's, on the right, a child from one of these studies where they were deprived from the nurturing that mothers typically give a child when they cry and they pick it up and soothe it and love it. What a radical. But the worst thing than the diminutive brain, and worse than that are the problems that these kids face. This particular syndrome will produce not only a physical change in the brain, but it emotionally stunts them, because the area of the brain that is not developed is the area which resides the ability to emotionally connect with someone. That never does develop. And in their later years, they have behavioral problems, social problems, and even, this is the science community saying, they have moral problems. They are unable to, because of the lack of nurturing when they were young, unable to have a conscience that was based on human care. And they could betray, lie with no conscience. They have learning problems, behavioral problems in school. Depression is a common, and unable to engage in meaningful relationships. Wow. Now that's way worse than just having your head a little smaller than the rest. We get these, what do they call the test where my grandkids, they go, oh, mine rates 95 or mine's 32 on the scale of how big the head is. What do they call that test? The test for little babies, they go the PK. Yes. Well, they always talk about, I don't know if that's something important, but it seems like it's important to them how big the head is. You know, they're always telling me how big the child is and how much they weigh compared to everyone else and how big the head is compared. I said, the rest of their life, we're trying to shrink their head, you know. Too big, thinking too big. Anyway, why do I say all of this stuff? Why do I dig up information to try to show the importance that physically and emotionally you are stunting your child if you do not give adequate nurturing? Why do I do that? Why do I take pictures of Romanian children from third world countries where they are extreme to the point where they aren't even touched except for to change a diaper on the scheduled time, not because when they need it, but just at certain rotations? Because I have experienced and come in firsthand in contact with families and children in this community who are suffering from RAD. Terrible, heartbreaking things that have threatened to destroy families. Some, with all the love in their heart, have taken in families like that and found out through adoption and found they did not have the wherewithal to even do it, to the point where they breaks your heart, but gave the child back. Unable to address that. This isn't stories I've heard. I've talked to the individuals. I've cried with the parents. I've met in meetings with trying to deal with this. I have talked to counselors who could stand up here and take the entire service just telling you time after time of people in this community who are suffering from that illness because of the deprivation. Just because you put food on the table, just because you give shelter and provide clothing for your children and an education, and maybe even structure and discipline. We will do this, we won't do that, this is how it is in this house, does not mean that you are not depriving your child from a needed component for success in life, and that is nurturing. We live in a latchkey society where children come home and they turn on a TV or a CD and they plug in and tune out, and there's a note on the door that says, you got to, the food's there, help yourself. You know, and some of you, in spite of that, turned out all right with normal head sizes. Thank God, because this would be, if we could tell by the size of your head, we would have a lot of different sizes in this room. But it matters. You can't tell as obviously whether a person is getting nutrition and nourishment and nurturing as you can in nature. This tree, last week I showed all these pictures of trees on my walk. But this tree is perfectly staked and it's straight up and down. And I can tell you as I walked by there this week, just because it was healthy at one time, that thing is 3 times as tall as I am. Some care was put in its beginning. And there was definitely some even composting around the tree to make sure. But if you look at the leaves, they're withering and dying when other trees in the area are not. What that means is something is wrong. It means that some way the nutrition, the nourishment that is needed for that young tree's life is missing. It's in distress and it needs attention. I water my lawn. And that lawn actually looks good because it's underground sprinkling, because I don't have to remember. But I have been noticing all year long that there's one spot right by the mailbox that is brown, right edge. And if I did the hard work, if I cared enough about the lawn, which I don't, Ray knows that. Ray does the job here at the. We don't give him any watering places, but so the color, don't blame on him. But he manicures it really nice. Ray Postumus. Thank you, Ray. Let's have a round of applause for Ray for man. I care a little bit about my yard, but I don't care enough to wake up when that sprinkler starts at 4 a.m. to go out and see why is that head not going. Do you care enough? Do you even notice if those you are tending and raising in your home are getting the adequate nurturing and nourishment? Or are some of them floundering in brown spots, even in a yard, a spot, a child? Are you watching? It's more important than a yard. And God has a way, but you need to have the heart, the compassion, and the priority of nurturing as you raise your children. Children are sensitive to your heart. They can hear what you are saying with your heart. Your mouth may say the right things, moms and dads. But if your body language is saying, you're a bother, You are an inconvenience. I am very upset with you. Even though all the right words, they hear your heart and feel the rejection. And there is no nurturing going on just because you end up saying all the right things and end up, come here, let me change your diaper. It's more important than a yard. Psalm 19, verse 14, let the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart, what's in there, be acceptable in thy sight. O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. If right now the guard is going up in your heart, thinking, for one thing, he's probably preaching at me. I'm not preaching at anybody in this room. I'm preaching at me, as I do every week. But if your guard is going up right now, trying to make a defense for yourself, stop it. Amen. Stop it. Hear what the Spirit has to say to the church. God desires to nurture and change us to a place where we will be productive, happy, fulfilled, and joy. And He wants us to receive His correction, if that's what's necessary. Nurture are not just the words spoken, not just the words spoken at a child. It's communication of the heart, and they can see and they will believe what is the heart says. Do they really believe that you even see them? Do you hear them? Do they believe that you love them? You say you do. We can be so busy in our lives doing all the things that need to be done. And we miss the most important things that God called us all to do. Like nurturing those in our care. This is not for parents only. You've got friends. You've got maybe a spouse, husband or wife. It's wilting, dried up, on life support. And you're providing just fine. Taking her out on the weekly date, Calvin. But is she drying up inside? Because she's not getting the heart spoken to her. Life is very much at this pursuit of money is a definite pull away from pursuit of what is really valuable, which is our friends, our family, and of course God. Miss the most important things. Luke 10, 38 through 42 says, as Jesus and his disciples went on their way, he, that is Jesus, came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. And she had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that she had to be made. She came to him and asked, Lord, don't you care? My sister has left me to do all the work by myself. Tell her to help me. And Jesus said, Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are really needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it won't be taken away from her. It doesn't matter if the dinner table is perfectly prepared and the forks in the right position, face down, napkin, whatever order that is to be. It does not matter, as much matter is what is laying on, that what is passed between the plates, between the food. The communication of a father who looks at his wife, or looks at his children, and a mother who looks at the needs and sees the heart and makes sure that nourishment is being provided and nurture is being provided around that table. I will tell you that my children do not remember the meals, what was served on the days. They don't look back at those times around the table. And soon we're going to be going up north for a week of get-together with family. The things that are discussed around those tables after the dishes are already cleared, because my wife is that kind of woman that they have to be cleared and put away and cleaned. But when that's done and she sits back down, what is remembered is these conversations and the communication and the nurture. That's what our children remember. They remember the story times where I ended up telling them stories about Johnny McGregor. And it wasn't filled with spiritual truths, but whatever words were said were blah, 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 fun and exciting. But what they were hearing is a man who loved his children.